All right, today we're going to play detective. And our subject, one of the most complex and honestly vital systems in your entire body. We're talking about your kidneys. And the mystery we're trying to solve is all about the hidden clues they send out when something's wrong. So let's see if we can crack this case together.
It often kicks off with something that seems kind of minor. Maybe some puffiness around your eyes when you wake up, or you notice your urine looks a little, frothy. So are these just weird random things? Or are they the very first breadcrumbs in a trail that could lead to a much, much bigger story?
To solve any mystery, first you got to understand the scene of the crime, right? Well, think of your kidneys as these incredible, high-tech filtration plants. They're working 24/7, keeping your body in perfect balance. They're cleaning your blood, getting rid of waste, managing fluids, the whole shebang. But when that perfect harmony gets disrupted, that's when the very first warning signs start to pop up.
Okay, so this is where our investigation really begins. We're starting with the first responders, those initial symptoms. These are the general alarms that make a doctor sit up and say, hey, we need to take a closer look at the kidneys. Now they're broad, for sure, but they point us in the right direction.
And these first clues, man, they can be all over the place. You might see fluid retention, that's that puffiness we talked about. Or, weird changes in your urine. A simple blood test might also show high creatinine, which is basically a waste product your kidneys are supposed to be filtering out. Any one of these things gets a doctor's attention and leads them to ask what is probably the single most important follow-up question.
And this, right here, brings us to the absolute core of the investigation. Is the problem with the main filter what's called the glomerulus, or is it happening somewhere in that huge network of pipes and tubes that process all the fluid? Finding the answer to this is the key to cracking the whole case.
So let's head over to the lab, because this is where the story really builds. To figure out exactly where the problem is, we have to look for much more specific evidence. We've got to go microscopic, analyzing urine for these tiny clues that act like fingerprints, pointing us directly to the source of the trouble.
And check out just how specific these clues get. If that main filter is damaged, the urine might have what are called red blood cell casts. Just think of them as these microscopic molds of the kidney's own tubes, which tells us there's bleeding happening in the filter itself. But if the problem is in the pipes, the clues are totally different. We might see these things called muddy casts, which point to a sudden injury in the tubes, or even pus cells without any bacteria, a really specific clue for other types of issues. These details are like finding the exact fingerprints that tell you who was at the scene.
So once we know if we're dealing with a filter problem or a pipe problem, we can finally start to identify the specific culprits, the actual diseases that are causing all this damage.
Let's look at a classic case, okay? Say someone had a sore throat. The timing of when their kidney symptoms show up is a massive clue. If symptoms appear just a couple of days later, the prime suspect is something called IgA nephropathy. It's actually the most common type of this disease in the world. But if there's a delay of 1 to 3 weeks, we're probably looking at a completely different culprit, post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. Same trigger, different timeline, totally different cases.
Another huge distinction is whether the injury is acute or chronic. An acute kidney injury, or AKI, it happens fast, and thankfully, it's often reversible. But chronic kidney disease, CKD, that's a slow burn. It develops over months, even years, and the damage is permanent. And you want to know the most specific indicator that you're dealing with chronic disease? An ultrasound showing that both kidneys have physically shrunk. That's the telltale sign.
And once a culprit is identified, what's the plan of attack? Well, for a lot of these common glomerular issues, the initial management is actually pretty straightforward. It's all about getting the system back into balance. So the first priorities are always, get that blood pressure under control, use diuretics to help the body get rid of excess fluid, and restrict salt intake to stop that fluid from building right back up.
But sometimes the kidney isn't acting alone. The investigation has to get wider to look for accomplices, other conditions, or even external factors that are either causing or just contributing to the kidney damage.
Take a systemic autoimmune disease like lupus, for example. The connection here is incredibly strong. Get this, about 1/3, a full 1/3 of all patients with lupus will develop a serious kidney complication called lupus nephritis. In cases like this, the attack on the kidneys is really just one part of a much larger body-wide issue.
And then you've got the outside jobs, accomplices that come from outside the body entirely. We're talking about things you might not even suspect, like common anti-inflammatory drugs or the muscle breakdown that can happen from extreme exercise,
Even certain snake venoms can be directly toxic to the kidneys, causing sudden and really severe damage to those all-important processing pipes.
And look at how interconnected our organs are. With something called hepatorenal syndrome, the kidneys themselves might be perfectly healthy, but they start to fail just because the liver is in really bad shape. It's just a powerful reminder that to solve a kidney mystery, sometimes you have to look for culprits in a completely different part of the body.
So, as we start to wrap up our investigation, what's the final verdict? What have we really learned from tracking all these clues and identifying these culprits?
What we've seen is pretty much a masterclass in medical detective work. A kidney diagnosis isn't about one single test. No, it's about following the evidence, starting with a really broad symptom and then narrowing it down with these super specific microscopic clues until you finally arrive at the real culprit.
And sometimes, a single piece of evidence can be the smoking gun. Just like this quote says, finding just one thing, like those red blood cell casts in the urine, can almost single-handedly tell you where the problem is located, pointing the entire investigation directly at the kidney's main filter.
And that really just leaves us with one final question. Your body has this incredible early warning system. It's constantly sending out signals, sending out clues. So the real mystery isn't just what's happening inside our kidneys, but whether we're paying close enough attention to actually hear what they and the rest of our body are trying to tell us.